Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. And today we have a guest who is a jack of all trades, and he's also another podcaster. So this is kind of a first. I don't know. Is it a first for you?
For what? To be on the other side of the questions?
The other side of the questions with another podcaster, yeah.
It's been a while. I've been interviewed a couple of times, but it's I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. New adventure, new experience. Could you introduce yourself, please, to the audience and also spell out your name?
Sure. Phillip J. Mellen, Phillip with 2 L's. Mellen is Mellen. I'm an artist / painter / collage worker. And I have a podcast called Ahtcast. I actually have 3 artist audio projects, I guess you could say. And Ahtcast is sort of a traditional question answer type conversation podcast with artists. The mixed media tapes, which is artist talks, they're casual, also audio and based on a subject or prompt. And then the Art Takes, which is a little more free form, various subjects, somewhat related to art, or the studio practice or studio life. So, yeah.
Okay. Since I always begin with with our guest's name, I just want to ask you, about any weird occurrences or, with your last name, especially. Do they keep throwing an O in Mellen?
Oh yeah, they'll take out an L, they'll put an O. One that I don't mind. I went to art school in Philly, so I have a friend who calls me, Big Philly style. I don't know that I have that much style, but anyway.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing with names. That's for sure, because it is our identity.
Right.
How did you get into? And of these 3 podcasts, which was the first?
Ahtcast was the first.
And could you spell Ahtcast? And because hopefully this is going around the globe.
Yes.
And and so if somebody's writing down the wrong podcast title, so
right, it's Ahtcast, and that's a little tweak on the Ahtcast, but I added not everybody has a Southeastern Mass accent. Sort of the outskirts of Boston. Take out the R's and put in an H, or remove that altogether. So it's just a play on that, really.
Yeah. So it's an Ahtcast.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember when I went to graduate school, I just rolled into the University of Miami's art department parking lot, and it was kind of confusing. There was no GPS back then. So I rolled down the window, actually cranked down the window.
Yeah.
And this is 75. And I said, could you please tell me what the art department is?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, that was the beginning of 2 years of brutal and annoying.
Little hazing.
Oh, yeah. People would invite us to potties, Potty. So what prompted you to get into this?
Well, it's interesting. I started a blog for myself and then a blog about art back, I think it was the blog about art that wasn't my own was about 2009. It was called the artistfamilytree.org. And it's still there. I just haven't maintained it since I started the podcast. So, but part of it is I wanted to get some kind of conversation going because I hadn't really explored New Bedford too much yet. Actually, that's not true. I started hanging out in about, I forget, somewhere around 2008. But it was just kind of new and fresh to me. And to support that, I started the blog and then moved into a friend of mine, Kevin Fernandez, had podcast, and it's sort of my first like close to home experience with that. So of course he ran it independently, you know, did a number of episodes with his friends and what have you. So that kind of gave me a little bit of inspiration to do it myself. Because the blog, I put so much time into it, the Artist Family Tree, and it wasn't social because nobody knew, you know, I put in so much time, and it was all like, I hope someone stumbles upon it, because it was before I really had Facebook, and I got into a community that way too. Mm-hmm. So the podcast just at the time that soon after I started Facebook, and I had a lot of artist friends, so I invited them to be on. I did a number of interviews with New Bedford artists, and so that was more surrounding a conversation versus like a blog sitting in there in the void, like hopefully someone finds it kind of thing. Exactly. But you would bring your own friends into it, and then the guests would bring their artist friends into it, so it created like a little bit of a community. And so it really, I needed that, you know, like I need that conversation, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but I've really, like, you know, I try to keep a set schedule now. I try to do one a month, but there was one year I had a couple of weeks where I had 2 a week, and it was like, okay, I'm getting a little, you know, cause I go full steam ahead, you know?
Right.
And I ended up getting burnt out, but so I got a little bit more of a regular schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that myself, where I want to have an archive or a backlog in case something happens and I can't commit to my Monday drops, which, you know, you have, well, I'm OCD and pedantic and such, and so I'm never happy with any of the podcasts, but I'm happy to have at least accomplished them. And one of the best things about the pandemic, as far as the podcast is concerned, is we can do it by Zoom. It's much less of a hassle than coming into our studio at Spectrum Marketing Group at the Holland Place in New Bedford. And but on the other side of the coin too is sometimes there's glitches, you know, but there's also some cool things, you know. You see the person you're interviewing's cat walk across the screen, and other little weird things, or someone has their window open. I think it was with Ralph Hickok. He had his window open. I can hear birds chirping out in the back. and it makes it real, you know. That's for sure. Now, you said you needed that. I also believe the way you do about that, and especially with this pandemic, I really think we need artist cafes. Hopefully, when this is over, and now they keep the end days for this seems now to be officially December of 2021.
Yeah.
So, one of the great things, you know, when we all studied art history in class, especially during the Impressionist period, even during German Expressionism, Europe is a cafe society, and we don't have that here, where people would just gather in a cafe, drink their coffee, drink their whiskey or brandies or whatever, and have really, really good discussions.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know the pandemic has certainly brought on a number of new podcasts, you know, on many different topics. I think we're trying, you know, the outside isn't, you know, for someone who may be a little socially awkward or what have you. It's having that the pandemic outside your door can make it even worse for you, you know. But like, I'm just grateful we have the technology, and, you know, some of the podcast episodes that I've done with artists, we kind of talk about that, where if, you know, imagine what this would be like if we didn't have the Skype and the Zoom and the, you know, the what have you, you know, that are similar. Like I'm grateful for it, you know, like, because it doesn't have to stop too much, you know, like, I mean, it's definitely morphed, and hopefully we're adapting to that. But but a part of it does suck, because you know, I can see you on my screen here, but how cool would it be to do this in your studio or a cafe or something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. the classic description of the artist in their garret or their studio is that we're isolated. And, we've all heard these stories where, especially like with Hatch Street and a bunch of the other artists, the facilities that have studios for artists in New Bedford, where artists have told me, I felt isolated at my home, wherever their studio was, or if they had an independent location, and then they went into Hatch Street and they thought, oh, this is going to be really, really great. And they felt just as isolated because everybody's working in their studio.
Yeah.
So, everybody's working. So nobody, so really we do need that socialization,
right?
Which I think is quite important. There's a group that I belong to on Facebook, and I hope to join them when my wife and I return to Detroit to visit with family there. It's the Detroit Fine Artists Breakfast Club, and it's such a cool concept where they go to this one location. I guess there's some sort of a lottery as to who's going to present, show their newest work. It's a very inexpensive kind of a breakfast situation. Yeah. And they do it every single Monday. Wow. And I've got to find out if they tape it or whatever. And I think it's a really great concept.
Yeah.
But of course it takes, commitment and dedication to do that.
Right. To organize it and what have you. Or?
Our schedules are, after having lived in Europe for a year, our schedules are just insane. We spend half of our lives, if not more, in our cars. Yeah. So maybe that's why Comedians in Taxis was such a big hit, because you, you can take advantage of the situation while you're locked inside of a vehicle. Philip, tell us about your background. I'm going to do the whole characteristic artist interview. When did you first know that you wanted to be an artist, and just follow through that way?
Well, I think it started with, like doodles and sketches and what have you when you're younger. And like at the time there was these, I guess you can call them, it's kind of, we didn't think of it then, but it was collaborative drawing where I would draw some of the figures in the scene, and another friend would draw some figures. And these are glorified stick figures, and like these, it was almost like like an anthill sort of like composition, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so things like that. And a friend of mine wanted to start, like, we were like in second grade or something. And he's like, we're going to start a business. We're going to draw marker tattoos on people, and he's like, oh, I have a crush on this girl. I want to see if she wants a tattoo. Like, kind of. But, I just never, I don't think I ever really thought of it. Like, I just did it, and so I guess in a way I never knew. I just never stopped. Like once I started, and of course in middle school was when I guess there was it was called Super Art or Super Art. That was sort of an after school thing or in between other classes that you could explore a little bit more than beyond the normal everyday curriculum for that, for art, and, we just made I remember having like a really good time making a plaster of Paris. I think it was the masks, and you, and I just flicked paint on it, and just like a various thing to do. But, like then we didn't think about it, like we weren't challenging ourselves because that wasn't like really a thing. And it wasn't until I think I just decided, through arts, high school was commercial art. And, just before computers, we had like this little Mac with like one video game on it, kind of thing. But we
was
had
it the Baby Macs, the fish tank
the
Macs?
Little guy.
Yeah. Where did you go to high school?
Bristol, Plymouth, the vocational high school here in Taunton.
Yeah.
So, and I was commercial art, like I said, and then, we did a lot of gouache painting stuff. Like, we came up with slogans for an image and what have you, which I think now it helps a little bit. Like, I think that tweak helped me with maybe titles, I would say, like even now, just thinking a different approach with it. And then, I just decided to go to BCC for a while and took some painting classes there. And, that was great. Now I think it's even better. They have the gallery now, and definitely expanded the faculty, and it's awesome to see. It's funny. It's funny because when I went to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, it seems like just after I graduate, the school boosts itself and gets more teachers and better facilities. I'm like, hey, what about?
Yeah, exactly.
What was that when I was there?
Was Ron Lister there when you were there?
Yeah.
So Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. Excuse me. I mean,
yeah, it's a mouthful.
You were on a track for, you know, a traditionalist education and the whole thing, right? I mean, it's
a foundation
very
for
classical.
Sure,
yeah. I mean, a lot of figure, a lot of painting technique.
Yep, definitely.
From BCC to the Philadelphia Academy of Fine Art.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and you know, I did a lot at BCC. I was there for a while, part-time for a while too. And just going down to Philly was pretty cool. I've never really moved out of the area. So that was a bit of a switch, and it's a beautiful city. I love it to this day. I haven't been back in a while, but I trust, you know, in that city, and, you know, it's just good fond memories. And the school was tough though. I mean, I never really had that experience where, you know, the third and fourth year of school, that's the first time I had that studio experience where you were isolated, and it was difficult. I found myself sitting and looking more, which isn't so bad all the time, but sitting and looking more than I did actual, like, you know, brush to canvas or what have you. It was difficult, and just like, you know, it wasn't all bad. Don't get me wrong, but it definitely was a challenge to think about work. Like, I'm doing this. What does it take? How much, you know, do I think this is actually a selfish activity, or does it enrich me? And now I think differently for sure, because I've got a little more experience doing it.
Right.
But it was a bit of a shock at first. But
it's a little bit of more maturity too. It's all worth doing all over again.
Yeah, really, it wakes you up, you know. And I never thought of like landscape painting before until I went there, and I just thought it's not a major idea, but you're in your subject, you know. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. Like, you know, you paint a still life, a couple of eggs, like when you're younger, and you think, I'm not in that subject. But then you get a little more serious, and you're challenged by the instructors, and then you learn to do that to yourself, and you become like the subject to a degree. And
because landscape painting, a lot of people don't realize that everything is changing as you're working. So if you're really not paying attention to the changes, like the clouds that you were on the left are now on the right, and you know, the lights change, everything's changed.
Yeah.
And it's really no different from figure drawing or figure painting, because, you know, that model has to, the pose starts to deteriorate.
Yeah.
And until they collapse into what's the most comfortable for them, but it's nothing like it was in the beginning.
Right.
And it really it is about observation. I think that was the greatest takeaway from art school, was the ability to really observe things more so than the average person. So you could say that we are, you know, technically trained observers.
Yeah. I still feel like I'm catching up a bit, but yeah. I mean, you know where to go after a while, and you gotta like I said, catch up to what you know is possible for a while. And then of course, once you get closer, it almost extends itself beyond your reach again. But in a good way. It's you know, like I said, that challenge that comes in. If you're, you know, just be serious about it. I mean, have fun too, don't get me wrong, but
it's got to be fun. It's got to be fun. I mean, do you ever catch yourself staring at something and not realizing why you're doing it, and then you realize, oh my God, that's like really, really incredible, and you're just looking at something that is so abstract.
Yeah.
You know, it's a shadows falling. There's a piece of door trim and something leaning up against the wall temporarily, and there's an incredible beauty in that. You know,
I think for some reason Instagram popped into my head after you know, you're saying that, because I feel like that's given us a reason. Sometimes a mundane subject, you take a picture of it, you post it on Instagram, but you know, it may not be as interesting as your last post or whatever it is, but it's still kind of like you're framing something differently and more often, because there is that venue for it, or that platform for it. So I think it can help, you know, with that too. And just like I like to take a picture of my painting and then leave it on my phone or the tablet, and then sometimes even post it to see it differently. it sometimes can help you finish it in some way.
No, that's absolutely correct. I used to do the phases, each progressive shots of a specific painting. I don't do that any longer. I don't know why I stopped, but it was quite helpful. But then sometimes too, there was, a specific painting where you look at the sequence of photographs and you're going, you idiot, you should have stopped at the third shot.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, that's the one that I painted myself into a corner, literally.
Yeah.
And now it's trying to work your way back out. And being an abstractionist, what are you working your way back out to?
Yeah. I mean, you can't really it's hard to put into words, but I talk to myself a lot when I'm painting, and I think about, you can't fix a painting. I mean, now you can interpret that word a little bit more, and maybe it's, I don't know if semantics is the word, but it's like, if you're going to fix a painting, then it's probably too precious, maybe at a point you can, like if you're young in school, you want to fix it to get the value right or something like that. But like if it's abstraction, I just think, if you're fixing it, then you're holding on to something that, it had its day and now it's time to move on, kind of thing.
Let me ask you about that from a personal standpoint. I've got friends, one in particular who does incredibly, and I'm gonna name you Robert Brodesky. Okay, does incredibly beautiful paintings. And if you only knew, if they ever x-rayed his paintings, if it's possible, there's probably 17 gorgeous paintings in there.
Yeah.
But he wasn't happy. He wasn't happy with number 1, number 2, number 3, number 16.
Yeah.
And yet there was some sort of bizarre mathematical thing where every X painting would be the one that I painted myself into a corner on. And I would fight and fight and fight. And sometimes I just put it aside and just keep on going, doing other work and then go back to it. But I refuse to gesso over or completely obliterate it, because to me, my mistakes are exactly that. And I need to be reminded of them.
Yeah.
And there's another weird thing that's always happened. Some of the pieces that I've hated the most are the ones that get, the biggest oohs and ahs. And also sometimes that one that you hated and you just put it in a stack of paintings when you're going through it a couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years later, and you go, damn, how is it that I hated this?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Could be a frustration thing.
Yeah,
it could be a frustration if you're working on something too feverishly, almost anywhere in your life. You got to put it down, or just put it on the wall, or on the shelf for a minute.
Yeah.
And like I said, with the taking a digital pic of it can help you see it differently. And of course, I've never put down the idea that, or even the practice of turning my painting upside down or on its side and then looking at the composition that way. And because I don't know, I think composition is my favorite thing. And, I think color relationships can certainly help that, be a part of it instead of being separate. Like I'm not just looking for big shapes or something, but it just helps you see it differently. And that's basic, but it's something that I continue to do, and it helps me anyway.
What do you think of that word preciousness? When you have some people say, oh, you're there's this preciousness and you don't want to mess with that. You just, I had an instructor who used to be right out there, Herb Cummings, God rest his soul. It's not. Get over it.
Yeah. Well, I think I was mentioning earlier, you can't really hang on to too much. And if you try to fix it, or it's probably because you're afraid to go on. And, I like these kinds of things that I'm saying, like, if only I would, like, I need to live my life the way that I paint, because you can't really, like, what is precious and what can you grip, and, you're going to slip,
Yeah.
And that is an interesting part of painting that, like just the idea of precious. I mean, you're going to hurt yourself if you deem that too soon, or because if you work around it, it's going to be so stressful, and it might even show later on, and hope, but I guess that you learn from that too, I think. So maybe it's not all bad to have something that's precious, like, oh, that yellow shape I can't touch that because it's perfect. And then if you go around it, you're going to see the halo, because it's almost, not everyone will see it, but you'll always know it's there.
Well, it's almost like that the last line, the dying breath of the shogun in The Last Samurai. Ken Yamamura, that was the actor, where it was an amazing contrast in this individual. He was a leader. His people were embattled. The shogun, was on his shoulders, that title, and yet he's into poetry and art. Yeah. And the cherry blossom trees, where he was trying to find the perfect cherry blossom, and his very last words were, "They're all perfect."
Yeah.
That kind of struck me.
Well, yeah.
When you said you talk to yourself, do you talk to yourself audibly or in your head?
Sometimes audibly. I'm trying to write it down more because I don't always remember it. Like, even 35 seconds later, oh, what was that? Because it often helps with titles, because I that's probably the weakest part of what I do is my titles, and so that I try to write down those thoughts. So hopefully that can be, whether it could even be a show title, just something like, it's a big part of it now. So yeah, but definitely it'll be out loud sometimes. And, it's amazing who you are, like, by yourself in a studio, and yeah. If you walked on the street doing that, who knows, someone might think.
Yeah, they throw a net over you, right? It's funny because with titles, I gave up on that a long time ago. And I just used, they're like catalog numbers, like the first series of paintings I did in this location when I came back from Portugal, they're all 45 because that's the number of the house.
Oh, okay.
And so it'd be 45 number 1, 45 number 2, all the way down the line. Yeah. And then I had a friend of ours who passed away. He was the senior vice president of promotions at CBS Sports, and we became very, very quick friends. And I was going through a period where I was wobbly. I just didn't quite know or believe in myself or whatever. And, then there's the whole career thing, what am I doing this for? All those doubts.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like his dying last words to me were, so what are you going to do about it, motherfucker?
Yeah.
And he just drilled me with that. So I did the next series of paintings based on that kick in the ass was the MF series. So, but the gallery people are like, what's the title of this? I says, it's on the back. Oh, it's just a number. And, yeah, that's the title, Yeah. So what do you title your paintings?
Oh boy. I feel like I have a sheet over here. I wouldn't mind grabbing if you don't mind.
Oh, not a problem. Yeah.
There's one of my sheets here. I just kind of fill it up. But I can read you some if you want.
Yeah, please.
Some of them, I try not to get too pretentious, but some of them are songs. Like one of them was I titled "A Church That Fits Our Needs," and that's I can't think of the band name now. That's terrible.
No, which reminds me, are you also a musician, or do you dabble in guitar?
A little bit, but I don't know how to play. Like I had a couple of acoustic guitars, and I would just do something and manipulate or affect, like,
because for some reason I got a flash about you with a guitar. For some reason, I don't know why, but
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's any pictures of me or anything like that. Is it? But yeah, I've done some music stuff, sound underneath poetry and what have you. On but there's this one which may where. Well, Nebula, Bandit, Power Lines. And sometimes it's very obvious, like directly from the painting itself, like something, I guess, more literal. But one of them is Puppet Theater, Letterbox Version, Brick in the Wall, of course.
Yeah.
This is stuff that it's a figure. It's not a vista. I mean, there's one I'm trying to think of. It's called That Is a Nipple and the Rest is Kung Fu was one of them. And, just like the imagery sparks certain things. Mm-hmm. And I try to write them down, and, I certainly won't use them, all of them, but maybe it might spark a phrase or something, like two of them together, or just notations, I guess, that can help. even if they don't become titles, it's still like a way to get closer to the work in some way. Of course, it almost puts an image to the image, like instead of just letting it be abstract. But like I think my work tends to be in the middle anyway. So,
well, you said something kind of interesting. You talked about poetry a couple of times. You used that word, and then the same thing now with your titles and everything. I've been experiencing something I never expected. It just came kind of out of the blue. I just got this flash in my head that I had to write down these words, and it's prose or poetry. It all depends, how you want to look at it. It's free form.
Yeah.
And looking at some of my work now, and it's funny because, my thing is I paint cold-bloodedly. There's no emotion. There's no predilections. I just put the first mark on whatever happens, as a sequence of events that occurs until something in my brain screams stop, and I stop.
Yeah.
And but in other cultures, poetry and painting in Asian culture, it's so closely related. Do you find that in your work more so?
I've actually tried to take it away from being like, because I for the longest time, I just wrote love poetry, and sometimes I read them or they'll come up on Facebook memories, and because I post a lot of them, and I'm like, why did I do that? But it was an experience that I had, and then it lasted for a while, had some lasting effects, but now I'm trying to, like, when I write, I want it to be related to painting a little bit more. And it's a bit of a challenge because I don't think it's like naturally what I do, but I'm willing to try to make that like almost an extension of the practice too, and have that be as closely related as possible. And, hopefully get some more shows so I can use some of those words and titles, because that would be nice.
One of the first things that you said at the beginning, at the top of the show here, was the artist family tree. And that really, the big bell went off of my head, because the concept of the artist index is, well, we're doing these podcasts because I remember in undergraduate school, and I've got to find that film. I got to watch it again. I keep referring to it on these podcasts, and I don't even know the title. It was done by a very famous filmmaker, and it was the abstract expressionists, and they were sitting on ladders. That's one of the things that was so bizarre about it. They're sitting on step ladders. And it was like, this Rothko, I can hear him speaking.
Yeah.
And I can see him moving. It was like, wow, because no longer you're looking at a painting, you have no idea where it came from, who did it. Even if you did know, there was really no connection, no human connection. And the part of the thing with the podcast is that hopefully in perpetuity, you and I in 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 years, will still be in the memory banks of people.
Yeah.
If that's important to anyone. But then the index itself is exactly that. It's basically an index of the goal is to document every living artist, visual performing and literary artist that came from the South Coast area all the way up to present day.
Yeah.
Because it's important. It's like building a pyramid. Pyramids weren't meant to preserve the body. They were meant to preserve the memory. And the other aspect of it is you and I may share to use the word loosely, a genetic connection or a DNA connection, but more from a creativity or artistic standpoint. We may Ron Lister. Okay. Yeah. So I know Ron, you know Ron.
Yeah.
We may have shared instructors as well. And I think that's ultimately important. What was the premise of artistfamilytree.org?
Well, just in case anyone wants to check it out, it's actually it's not actually a .org. .org is part of the name. Like it's Artist Family Tree, .org, and then it's .blogspot.com. Just in case anyone to get confused.
Okay. So .org and then
.blogspot.com. But it's not your typical. It's not an actual .org. That's .dot. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's I had just come back from Philly, and I started the blog, and I just basically had each blog post was a certain subject.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they're generally speaking, like one post would be landscape. And within that, I would have clusters of artists, and the artist name was a link to their website or image search or something if I couldn't find the website. So if you like so-and-so, then you might like these other three artists that, maybe it's color that's similar or compositions, or they handle trees the same way. I mean, any of those types of things. There was one for still life. There was one for video art. I mean, I tried to cover it all. And, it was a lot of work. But like I said, it was just like, I didn't have any kind of social network, whether it be online or in person yet. So it just,
that's kind of fascinating. There. I mean, I'm really fascinated by this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think.
Well, no, I mean, I know I'm finding some little similarities in our thought. Yeah. And so on and so forth.
The idea was just to help me and help other artists find other artists, that they might like the subject. And then I started doing an artist of the month, like post, and I guess that was about it. But I invited the readers, if hopefully there was some and I got a couple of people that chimed in to add themselves to the mix. If you feel like you work like Bryce Martin, or he's one of your influences, or just one of your favorites or something, I'll put your link next to him, because that's where you want to go. Right. So I think I got about 3 people that did that, which was nice. I wanted it to just almost like be its own thing, to take off on its own. But of course I'd have to make the change, add the links and all that stuff. But that's what I wanted to do. And of course, then I never had a plan to do that. It just kind of happened out of maybe necessity or what have you, or just an interest in that sort of thing. And then came the podcast, and then came the morph, expansion of Ahtcast. And, but yeah, it's, does that illustrate it somewhat, or? Oh yeah,
completely. Yeah. I find it fascinating because, when you were saying that, one of the gorilla in the room, or the elephant in the room, or the thing I'm carrying on my shoulders, as an abstractionist from day one as a graduate student at the University of Miami, where, minding my own business, we had a little critique or something going on in somebody's studio, and one of my pieces of work was leaning up against a table, and this undergraduate, sticks his head in the door and says, whatever it was, he was looking for somebody. And then he looks and he sees my work and he goes, oh, that looks like just like Cy Twombly's.
Yeah.
So I had never heard of Cy Twombly before. And I just basically thought to myself, well, he's probably an undergraduate student or something, because he's not in any of the graduate classes that I know of.
Yeah.
Because there's only the previous one, and you're only aware of the one ahead of you and the one behind you. And actually, so 3. So I just totally ignored it. And then it was like constantly being the Cy Twombly, and Dave Richardson, who's a woodworker and an artist, said, you gotta look. And I'm like, no, I don't want that guy to go in my head.
Yeah.
So I would have been fascinated to see what you could have done with something like that, where you've got somebody who wants to be equated with Bryce Martin. Yeah. And then you've got me, who doesn't even know how Cy Twombly ever got into his head, and how is it possible that, some of the earlier works that I did were so close. It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. It's the collective consciousness, I guess.
Yeah, it is cool. Yeah, it's every now and then I can think about cleaning it up, but I more of a conversation, I think, is what I'm after. So that's why I'm sticking with the podcast,
Yeah. I tell you, I'd love to invite you to share those blog spots as articles on the South Coast Artist Index, because we've got the podcast and then we have those articles, and it's all about content. And because I think they're fascinating. It's something that I had never even thought of. It's more something that an art historian would be rabid to find out more about. As they're writing on people.
That's cool. It's cool. I mean, I like what you guys are doing.
Well, again, there's so much more to do, but as you know, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. I have a list, and it's like, I'm never going to get to these interviews, but on the flip side, it's like, good. Like there won't be a shortage of people I can ask, No,
I mean, we've recorded 55, of which we've dropped 48. It's going to be Earl White, who's going to be coming up next. We just dropped Ben Martinez, which was 47. And if you look at the Hatch Street art studios, there's 65 at least artists there alone.
Yeah.
And so I'm still shy by 10 people that just in one location. I mean, I wonder how many artists are there in this entire area.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm glad you're including me, because I don't know if I'm quite on the South Coast, but.
Oh yeah. I mean, and again, you got to have that wiggle room. So whether you're directly or indirectly connected to the South Coast, and just the people that from the South Coast is enough. That's the connection. I mean, short of, you stopped in New Bedford once on the way to the Cape and bought a pack of gum. Well, you were here. You know what I mean? And at some point in time, when this gets to the point that we want it to, the first phase, this is also franchisable. That we will now have a complete package, completely set up, so that nobody has to go through what we did to develop this. So that now I can sell it to you like you're from Sandusky, Ohio, and it would be the Greater Sandusky Artist Index.
Yeah, that's cool.
And eventually this website becomes the mothership, and those franchisees are all feeding the mothership, so that we'd have this incredible national database of artists. Cool. Yeah, I think it would be cool. What's on the horizon for you?
I just, as much as possible. I mean, I don't really like the phrase, but just like business as usual. But I've actually started to have previous guests come up with questions for a guest who I feel that their work might be related in some way. And it could be anything from mark to its color to subject, or, so just to spruce it up a little bit, so it's not my same questions all the time. I don't know. I want to just, I'm trying to think. I feel like there was something that I was thinking about doing. I don't know. I get asked that question, and, like I don't really have a clear picture of what's next, to be honest, but I definitely am going to continue it. I think Instagram has done wonders for like I mentioned, that list that I want to interview some more people that I've connected with there. I mean, I gotta just continue on.
Well,
I guess not get, make it more of a priority. Like I said, I took a little bit of time off, and then, trying to do it once a month. So.
Do you have any, I refer to them as big fish. So, I've been wanting to speak to this one particular artist, and my format is I have a lot of women, for example, seem to be the most hesitant to come onto the show. Because they're shy or they don't know what to say. And then there's also men, male artists who are like, well, I'm not that important. I've got, I don't want to be talking about myself. And it's just a conversation. That's all it is, because I can't squeeze in everything about you that anybody would want to know, including myself, into 45 minutes or an hour. Yeah. But, and that's why I tell people this is not a one and done. This goes for you too. I'd like to have you come back as often as, we find it necessary or convenient, because, and then the analogies, my mind works in analogies. You're not just a page, you're a chapter or a volume, or more, or a complete collection, and I find that important. So are there big fish, or whatever you'd want to call them, the one artist that you really want to speak with?
in the beginning there was, and it was because of they were influenced or inspired sort of the project.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like, but on the flip side, it's also for virtually anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said in the beginning, I think I had some big fish, to put it, to use your words. Like this guy Lauren Monk, who he does a James Caan report, and he's in the New York area. He does video visits to shows, and of course, I think they're starting to pick up a little bit more. But of course, even his production was halted. But he gets these great like zoom in shots of like paintings, and he'll talk about them. He does some research on the artist like beforehand, and that was like an inspiration. So he was someone I was glad that agreed to be on. But like I said, I think at this point it's like, it doesn't matter who they are, as long as I can feel like I respond to the work. So there'll be more of a conversation. And generally they're, if you want to say abstract in nature, but really it's like, I was just like, I mean, I just didn't want the same artists that maybe had big names on it, like I because it doesn't matter to me for the most part.
So
I'd like to
emerging, to establish, to
it's real, totally. But I definitely, I mean, to put it into the emerging part is probably a good probably where I jump off from and start from mostly.
Have any of the people that you have interviewed gone on to bigger, better kinds of things?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Great follow-up shows, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple of those. Those are nice, I mean, people that have just shown farther, from their home, I guess you could say. There's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's something I really don't like. It doesn't come across to me right away, because their work is like more of their, like what I pay attention to. And, and I apologize for not being able to think of someone.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I'm not one of those Johnny on the spot interviewers, I just ask whatever pops into my head based on whatever it is you said that popped in your head,
But it is cool. I mean, there's a lot of group shows that happen. And I think if you get invited into those by someone in London, and you're like someone like me who's just in, Taunton, Massachusetts, it doesn't expect those sort of things. When those happen, those are great because that expands the community. And I mean, I'm trying to think I know there's probably even artists that started galleries afterwards. I mean, there's like Susan Carr has a show. She's on the Cape. She has a show at Lab Space right now. And what is the name of the Hudson? I believe it's Hudson, New York. I probably got that wrong. I think Hillsdale. I think it is actually. So pardon my my brain freezes, but So she's doing well, and so that's cool. She was an artist that I did a follow up with. So there's two interviews with her on Ahtcast. So that's cool. And it's I actually have some. Well, anyway, I'll let you ask the questions.
No, it's fine. So now I'm going to go to something a little bit, for some people may believe it's morose or morbid or whatever. We talked about, moving on and up. But what about those who passed on? I mean, I had two situations. God. One, it's still a regretful thing, and that really was a kick in the head that this is important what I'm doing. It's not just a dream to put together this thing. Yeah. And, people who listen to the show have heard it, a dozen times or more. My wife and I were at Dr. Richard Connor's house. He's a collector. He deals with mid-century estates of artists. And we were talking to Dawn and Elizabeth Wilkinson and Nicole and Mark St. Pierre walk in. And it's like, got to go say hello, because it's also a chance for me to speak French to them, because I don't get that chance that often. And it just keeps me in some sort of practice. And they're just a lovely They're a lovely couple.
Yeah.
And we were about ready to make ourselves across the room when we got a text that our daughter had to go to urgent care because she had twisted her back in school and thought, it's nothing. And then like, it's really starting to hurt. See, these kids are carrying like 80 pounds of books in their backpacks, you know?
Right.
Anyway, and then he passed the next morning.
Yeah.
And that just rattled the hell out of me, that how, I'm talking about preserving memory is so important. And then Dan Logan, a gentleman, a photographer and a writer that, my dog Daisy and I met on the dike in Fort Phoenix, who would document all the fishing boats going in and out of the harbor. And we struck up a conversation and a friendship. He passed suddenly. And it's this is important what you're doing. This is important what I'm doing.
Thank you.
We're more, it's more, we're more than just bookmarks. Right.
Yeah, no, I believe it's like any kind of, it may not be released, like if you get an idea, you write it down, or you get a painting, you document it, by just taking a picture, even if you paint over it or you sell it or you give it away and make a trade. Like, I think it's the artist's like life and their story is important too, as well as the work. And that's just another way to document something. I mean, and I definitely think it's important, and, and it's fortunate to be in the position that we're in because we can do this, we can talk to these artists and there's a place for it to go rather than just being like, like, I don't know. I mean, I record stuff, my poetry all the time. And that's where it started too, is like, I'm sick of recording myself. I'm gonna actually get a conversation with somebody and record that,
Yeah. That is important. Phillip, we're rolling on to the end of our time. Okay. Is there anything that you would like to leave people with about yourself as an artist, yourself as a podcaster, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I'm still chipping away because of it, I think it's helped my work, and I think it's more about that. And, when I don't do it, I definitely feel it, the podcast, it affects everything. Cause how often, especially now, with the pandemic, like, do we get to talk about art, and to feel where someone else is coming from with their own work. And, it's great when you can, have that conversation with somebody and they may even give you a little bit in return, like as far as like for your work, sometimes the guests will say something about my work and it's like unexpected, but it's nice,
Yeah.
That little thing. But I'd actually like to give some shout outs if I can.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So these are some other podcasts that are out there. It's there's one called Studio Break. That's with David Linaway. And that's, I believe, studiobreak.com. There's I Like Your Work with Erica B. Hess, which is a great one to check out. She does like a lot of like resources for artists as well. Mm-hmm. She puts together shows, and Discovery Stage is actually in Scotland, and that's like a really new one. She does really like Shirley Bell. She does like a variety of programming, so to speak, and they're generally short, so it's not a big commitment, but they're very interesting and like thought provoking. And she doesn't always have a guest, and a lot of times it's a presentation by her, so it's really kind of different, kind of cool. Rebecca Potts puts together Teaching Artist podcast, which is great, and I think she's doing some shows too. And if you're a teacher, a teaching artist, of course, that's what it's all about. So Painters Today by Lucy Cox, that's in England somewhere. I'm not sure if it's London, but and then one of my favorites, Gorky's Granddaughter. It's a video studio visits, and they do in the New York area. And those guys they give you quiet shots of the paintings, and then they talk to the artist. They'll go back to the paintings, and it leaves a lot of room for the viewer, to like just that inside look. So, but yeah, I always kind of bring a lot of those guys up, and just wanted to kind of, bring attention to them too.
No, that's great. I mean, as far as the visual aspect, the video aspect, that's another element that, but unfortunately, it's just, there's no time. So it's going to take donations. It's going to take grants. It's going to take something, it's going to take, a big bag of money dropping on our doorstep. But it'll happen. It'll happen.
Yeah.
And then here's the one that I really ask quite often, depending on who I'm speaking with. How would you like to be remembered, Phillip Mellen?
Well, I hope they don't forget the projects, it'd be nice. And that's a strange question, but I don't, because that's another question I almost can't answer. Like, I don't really know, but just someone that works away and hopefully is not always consistent, but the thought is always on the art and the artist. So, and hopefully I can record as many people as possible.
I know where you're coming from. I'd like to have you come back time and again, because there's just so much to cover. There is a like-mindedness, I think. Hopefully we could even do some collaborations at some point, and hopefully those collaborations will have some financial rewards as well that are involved, because this is so important. And we may be inspiring some young person and have no idea that we're doing that.
Yeah.
Is it important to know? No. Is it nice to know? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but
yeah. Go ahead.
It's nice to think that, because they got to be out there. I mean, because not everyone tells you. And that's the hope too, is like that, regardless if I find out or not, like, it's just nice to put it out there. And I think where my podcast is at now, it's more the artist that brings the people, which is totally fine. And I often say that all I do is hit record, and then I probably run my mouth a little too much during some of them. But
well, me too. But sometimes, sometimes you get a guest where it's like trying to open up a can of beans or something with a spoon.
Yeah.
Other times it's like, okay, well, you're doing really great. I'm going to go out and wash the car. I'll be back. And then there are other times where you're looking at the clock. The studio clock is over there, and you're looking at the clock and you're going, oh, damn, I want this to go on. And then you keep thinking, maybe this might be the podcast that we're going to go on. We're limited. That's why I put 2 hours. So it gives us a buffer, buffer zone sort of thing. Yeah. But I'd like to let this sucker roll right down to the end, and I'll have 2 podcasts in a can, part A and part B, so. Yeah,
I've done that too. And I spoke to an artist for 4 hours once.
Really?
And at that time, I didn't really think of the 2-parter, because a lot of it, I think, was just getting acquainted and being small talk. Like, even after that, like, what's your dog's name? But fun stuff nonetheless.
Yeah.
But, I actually edited it down to 1 hour. So I believe I still have the other 3 hours of it. But it's like, those are the great ones too, is because you really hit it off with somebody and you don't even think about that,
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
It's a lot of rewards.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more time, I'm going to thank our guest, Phillip Mellen. Talk about those blank out periods. I don't even have a cheat sheet. Middle initial L?
J.
Okay. Phillip J. Mellen,
yes.
Artist, podcaster, raconteur, and this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. See you next time on the In Focus Artist Podcast, brought to you by the artistindex.com. With that, goodbye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index Podcast. The South Coast Artist Index Podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.